There is a bullet in Euskarita Askatasuna's magazine that has been waiting for its owner for 50 years. His target is the most wanted man in the history of Spain. They call him the Wolf. What you're about to see is how a 20-year-old kid with no military experience and no bulletproof vest managed to achieve the impossible.
We have to act tonight if we want to draw them all in.
Infiltrating the leadership of the terrorist group, gaining their trust, and turning in 158 terrorists in a single night was the most brutal and perfect espionage operation in our country's history. No one escapes the Wolf's mouth unharmed. That mission began with a phrase that chilled his blood in a dark room of the Secret Service. Miquel, forget it. Look at him.
Take care of your future. If this goes well, you'll have to get plastic surgery, change your name, and sleep with a gun under your pillow for the rest of your life. Will you have to kill Miquel for the legend to be born?
This is the story of the man who almost put an end to Euskarita Askatasuna terrorism, but who condemned himself. Welcome to the hunt for the Wolf. In 1974, Euskarita Askatasuna was not just a gang, it was a shadow army, secretive and lethal. The SECED, the Secret Service of that time, was blind. They needed eyes inside, and those eyes belonged to a young Basque, Euskaldun, who moved in Abertzale circles. His transformation into Gorka was absolute. He didn't come in as a trench gunman, but as something much more valuable, an architect. Miquel became the head of infrastructure. What did this mean? That he controlled the organization's oxygen? While the legal and freed commandos discussed politics and objectives, Miquel got them the only thing that really kept them alive: shelter. He bought the safe houses, rented the secure locations, and got the vehicles. His efficiency was his curse and his salvation. By centralizing the logistics, he also centralized the information. He had the entire map of the terrorist network in Madrid and Barcelona in his head. He ended up reporting directly to the top leadership, earning the blind trust of leaders like Iñaki, Mujica, Arregui, and Esquerra. They would sit down to dinner with him, telling him their fears and their plans, without knowing that every word was being memorized for their future sentence. But living a double life is exhausting. The most critical moment happened during a routine transfer. I was driving a car with members of the Madrid Commando. The atmosphere was tense. Euskarita Askatasuna had suffered recent losses, and paranoia was contagious. One of the veterans, with the glazed look of someone who's been on the run for too long, put a gun to his heart. The cold metal against his ribs was a reminder that his life was worth less than a bullet.
You move too smoothly, Gorka. Sometimes I think you're a cop.
The car was still running. Miquel knew that if he stopped, he'd die. If he stuttered, he'd die.
If I were a cop, you'd all be rotting in jail already. If you don't trust me, get out and walk to the border.
This terrorist hesitated for an eternal second, then lowered his weapon and let out a nervous laugh. That arrogance saved Miquel by defying death. He earned the respect of the killers. What they didn't know was that this problem solver was actually digging their graves. By the summer of 1975, Operation Lobo had grown so much that it was about to collapse. Under its own weight, Miquel had accumulated a huge amount of industrial information, real identities, addresses, contact mailboxes, and escape plans. But in the world of espionage, time is an executioner. Euskarita Askatasuna, which operated with a sixth sense for danger, began to detect leaks. They didn't know who, but they knew someone was talking. The controllers of the Secret Service faced a terrible decision.
I think it's best for Gorka to continue until the end.
To let Mikkel keep rising until he controlled the entire organization. But operational reality and political fear dictated the outcome. If they waited one more week, they wouldn't have a victory. They'd have a tortured corpse in a ditch. The operation was launched, but to save him, the final scene was the safe house on Rosalón Street in Barcelona, the heart of the network that Mikkel had built. There was Pedro Ignacio Pérez de Otegi, alias Wilson, the mastermind behind the special commandos, the Beretziak hiding. Wilson was relaxed, spreading maps out on the table, convinced that he was in the safest place in Spain. Thanks to his friend Gorka Magoas to Gorka Inorki. He replied in a faint voice. The operation began on September 19th. The police broke down doors simultaneously in Madrid and Barcelona. It was a devastating domino effect. Thanks to Mikkel's list, the officers weren't searching blindly. They went straight to the target. As a result, the outcome was staggering. 178 terrorists arrested. The armed commandos were taken down, the support network fell, and most importantly, the military leadership was brought down. Or so it was thought that night. Mikkel Lejarza had to die so that the legend of El Lobo could survive. Euskadi Askatasuna, mortally wounded but not finished, quickly managed to regroup and impose its only law, revenge. The reaction was visceral. The Basque country woke up plastered with his face. They weren't seeking a policeman, but the traitor. The order was clear. It didn't matter how long it took or what it cost, the wolf had to die. To survive, the state had to erase the man in a Secret Service clinic. The scalpel took away his nose, his cheekbones, and his chin. Was it a necessary butchery? Weeks later, when the bandages were removed, in front of a mirror, Mikkel looked for his reflection and only found a stranger with tight skin and a broken gaze. His superior stood by his side, not to congratulate him, but to read him his rights as someone dead in life.
Say goodbye to everything. Now you are a ghost, and ghosts have no family.
How long do I have to stay hidden? Forever?
You'll check under your car every morning, and you'll never sit with your back to a door.
And the prophecy was fulfilled. He has lived half a century with false names, changing cities like changing shirts, sleeping with a gun under his pillow. Euskadi Askatasuna tried to hunt him down on multiple occasions, obsessed with avenging their greatest humiliation, but they always arrived a second too late. Mikkel Lejarza, the wolf. A person who could have put an end to the terrorist organization in the 70s and could have prevented hundreds of innocent murders. But in the end, there is no victory. There is something worse. There is an infiltration that works, a network that could fall, and a decision that prevents it. Because a problem is not always allowed to live due to incompetence. Sometimes it is allowed to live out of necessity, and when that happens, it is not protected. The one who risks his life to put an end to it is pushed aside and left alone. And that perhaps is the hardest thing to accept about this whole story. If you want to help me, and on top of that have access to images and text from my work, as well as ad-free videos, become a paid member on Patreon. I'll leave the link below.